Hi everyone, my name is Cristina Cabrillo Santos, and today I have a special guest, Emily. And what we'll be talking about today is riffing off of a topic that I really wanted to start talking about last year. I did an interview with a friend of mine last October, and since then, nothing else happened because we went into the pandemic and life completely changed for us. So it is time to kick off the new year with a new interview and with a new person. And so the topic is still, how do we use the power of our mind to influence our life and daily life, work life, and I want to bring in Emily so she can speak from her personal experience. She's gonna tell us a little bit about herself, a little bit about her background. She has gone through some injuries in her life, and yeah, let's just kick it off, and we'll just naturally flow. Okay. So Emily, welcome.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much for joining me. And
Lovely to be here.
tell us a little bit about your background and yeah, what you're
So,
about.
sure. Thank you for having me. It's really a pleasure to be able to be up here and share my story. And that's kind of what I'd like to do today. I know the theme of this is how do you use your mind to heal? And so I'd like to tell you a little bit about my background on how I discovered it and why it's worked for me or how it's worked for me and why I'm here today and how I got here. Because we all have a story about that and how we got to the place we are. What was your trajectory like? Type of story. So, as Christina mentioned, my background, my formal training is in public health. I got that from the Mailman School in New York City. And from there, I had just been doing a lot of worksite wellness things at the Department of Health, as well as just my own personal study and my own different hybridizations of movement and mind. And how do you combine those together, whether it's to heal or just to level up whatever it is you're doing? So that's kind of what I'm into now, this hybrid field, this overlap of where movement and all these things can kind of be brought up to the next level quality. But it doesn't have to be physical movement. It can also be, level upping in your job. So how do you just live a more conscious life?
Absolutely.
And whether it's through your body or in other ways, because there's a lot of wisdom there, higher wisdom there that I think that we're a little disconnected with, or I was at least. So,
Yeah.
what led me to be interested in this? Um, for me, I think that the biggest storm that I hit that really just was a slap in the face for me was upon arriving to New York to start graduate school.
Mm.
I had been realizing that I was following a path. I was, medical school bound and wanted to be a doctor in a hospital. And I realized that I wasn't sure if that was making me happy,
Mm.
but I know I just had to do it. So a lot of different things happened around that time. I arrived to New York, a lot of different adjustments, reverse culture shock. I'd been living in another country and moved back. And I think that with the pressure of school, I think with, and really just this consistent unhappiness that was just still there. I couldn't suppress it as
Mm.
much as I had tried. And so whatever you don't address, even if you can't see it or choose not to see it, it doesn't mean it's not there. It will always find a way to rear its head.
Oh.
So, and it did for me at some point. I think that I came to a point where I was just stressed, tired, unhappy, and all these things, and no longer could my subconscious mind really suppress that. So I started resorting to kind of, I just wanted to do other things. Like I was a runner in university, in college. And so I just used any excuse, any distraction to not do and continue on the path that I was going. And the lack of productivity and the lack of success and achievement that I was feeling in my career, I needed to feel from somewhere else. So, I would do it into running, I would do it into yoga, into other areas to feel that fulfillment that I wasn't getting from the main wire in my life, the main thread in my life. So eventually I had gone through a phase. We're going to fast forward, and I had at some point had a back accident, and the disc in my spine kind of just popped out. And
Wow.
that wasn't the bad part. I think the healing part was bad. So now I wasn't able to really move or do any of the things that I was using to cope with my unhappiness, which was physical activity. So all of a sudden now my coping mechanism is taken away from me. So now what do? You kind of panic. And in trauma, this is usually called a freeze mode, where you kind of just get panicked and overwhelmed, and then the computer in your brain just kind of shuts down because it doesn't know what else to do. It has nothing to reach out to. So I couldn't move anyway, and I spent maybe a good year or two trapped in my apartment, very embarrassed, because I felt like my body was swelling in certain places as well as a result. So embarrassed about what I looked like, didn't reach out to any of my friends, cut off of social media, embarrassed about the fact that my life had come to a halt. I wasn't moving anywhere. And in New York City, it's all about like, what are you doing now? You know, what's the next move? How are you hustling and how fast are you doing it? So wasn't getting anywhere. Just very humiliated about everything. And I didn't even have the words to be able to reach out to somebody and say, hey, this is what I'm going through. Please help me. So on all those levels, it was a very lonely time, to just be on your own and just not know anything and not be able to do anything else to make at least that day go by a little bit better, whether it was taking a walk. All of that was off the table for me.
Wow.
So all you can really do is lie there and think, really. My questions evolved from, why did this happen to me? What the heck in life did I do so wrong to deserve this? When have I ever done anything to merit all the stuff that's just kind of fallen onto me? Why me? And you just don't get an answer for that. And that's frustrating. So I had many conversations with a God that I don't even know if I believed in, because I was desperate for answers. I was desperate for somebody to guide me out.
So real. So real.
Yeah. And it got to a point where I got into a depression. And I think that every time I wanted to I said to myself, I'm not going to see the light at the end of the tunnel. I There's no choice. There's no other way out. There's no light at the end of the tunnel. So I have to just voluntarily just leave everything. This is misery. Um, and I think my father visited me one day, and he sat next to me. He didn't know exactly what was going on because, again, I didn't have the words to be able to describe to anyone what was happening.
Can we
And
just pause for a second? Your family does not live in the States, or they do?
correct.
Oh,
Well, my parents at that time were in Pennsylvania, so not too far from New York.
okay.
And I didn't want to see them. I hadn't gone to a family event in a few years either, just because I didn't want to hear comments from my relatives or anything
Yeah.
about where I was in life or why I looked the way I did, or, why were you swollen and things like that. So my dad did come because he had to come for some reason. He stayed with me, and he didn't know that I was in a very just down, dark, depressed time in my life. And of course, he didn't know that I'd come to my wit's end about everything. And he just quietly sat down next to me one day and he said, it seems like something's not right, that you might be going through something. I just want you to know that the difference between people who survive really hard challenges in their life and the people who do not, who end their lives because they can't take it anymore, was a matter of time. That's the only difference between the two, was time. The
Oh,
first,
chill,
yeah,
chill.
yeah. And it was chilling for me because he didn't know this, but I felt like he had invaded into my mind and I felt terribly guilty. So his words were basically saying the only difference between the people who actually made it out and actually got to the light at that end of the tunnel was waiting long enough. Why? Because just like the good times come to an end, the bad times do too. Nothing is permanent. It's
Amen.
just, did you wait it? Did you survive the wait? That's it.
Yeah.
And that really rang with me. I think I also felt very guilty.
Mm.
I'm not a parent, but now to understand the parent's perspective of what would it ever be like, what kind of pain would I inflict on other people if I was no longer in this world. And then for a parent, I know many parents, the biggest fear is to have your child go before you when you don't think it should happen that way.
Oh, yeah.
And so the thought that I'd be responsible for that too really gave me a sobering, just kind of wake up call that it's not just about me. And it's not just about the fact that I'm in a place of discomfort, but the ramifications that that has, the domino effect, the ripple effect that it has on the lives of other people, and that you're partly responsible for that. And so he said it just at the right time. And eventually, I think every day, like it was hard after that, of course, but fast forwarding, enough time did go by where one day I just kind of looked down and I was like, oh, wow, I'm moving more than I did before. Or my body's kind of, the swelling's going down.
Mm.
And so now I was cooking with gas in the sense that now I had my own fuel and motivation to stay alive and keep living and see the end of this, because I was actually seeing changes, and that became kind of this self-fueling cycle now. I didn't need to, I didn't need a reason other than that.
Yes.
So that's how I had kind of came out of that. And during that time, I think in total, it was probably about 3 years that I just didn't connect with many people aside from a few neighbors,
Yeah.
that I started to get back on my feet. And I started doing a lot of thinking about how I came out of that and just the philosophy of it. And how people say, wow, the way you think, your thoughts will become things. How do you manifest those things though? Even if I fake it till I make it and act positive, does that have an effect? And if so, how?
Mm.
So I think that a lot of the wisdom I obtained was from my personal experience living through it.
Yeah.
But now when I look back, I only understand those words of wisdom or all those cliche expressions that we hear, thoughts become things, manifest, um, whatever you think comes into fruition, you create your destiny, all those things. Yeah, sure, they make sense now because I lived it. But a
Yeah.
lot of people hearing it, they might not have lived it. So how do you get those people to understand what that is so that they can use it? Not necessarily to cure themselves, not just that, but maybe it's just to get the next job or realize your higher potential in life. So now my mission in life, with my academic background, in combination with my personal life experience, in combination with the personal study I'm doing, and in combination with my love for communication and public speaking and languages, which happened to be a side thing, I wanted them to all just meet together at this junction where I could now explain to people in a more scientific way rather than a mystical way of how that actually happens. And there actually is a science behind it. There actually are neuron synapses that are connecting and unwiring and rewiring. So it's not just kind of mystical, blah, blah, blah. There is something going on when you think things, and your body is like, and all the cells and everything inside of it, they're like little spies that listen to every single thing that you think, and they just follow orders. They don't care if it's bad or good. They don't discriminate. So when you have those recurring thoughts that you gained when you were a child about not being good enough at something, and you're still repeating them, not because you're consciously doing it, but just because it's on auto programming and
Mm.
years and decades of conditioning,
Mm.
how do you unhook that? It's because a certain thought now has been wired between those neurons. So how do you unlearn that, undo the wiring, and reconnect it in a way so that your thoughts actually serve you, not impede you? So that's kind of my passion now. That's kind of what I'm out to teach. And I grew up multicultural, kind of ping ponging back and forth between different countries. So my thing was languages. I had known, and I said, well, I want to do this not only in English, but I want to start public speaking in other languages as well. I know much of this information is translated, but sometimes it's just not the same as just hearing it in your mother tongue.
Mm-hmm. So
So
true. Yeah.
yeah, so that's where I am now, and that's where I'm kind of trying to get this message out to people. And
Mhm.
I've been doing it in small ways. I was teaching yoga, and I was incorporating those little messages and letting them live it physically by doing the poses and experimenting with that
Mhm.
and their boundaries, their fears. Um, but I want to level it up to a bigger audience, to
Yeah.
people, because I think whenever you've been through a hard time, you want to save other people too, because that's where compassion is cultivated, you know. And I am a person that needs to kind of teach what it is I learned. I need to brain dump it somehow. And I'm sure I could do that in a journal, yeah, but it's not serving anyone there. It's not helping anyone there. I would like it to reach the ears of somebody that could really use the information, that could help from it, and probably possibly not need to go through the same hurdles that I went through just in order to learn this lesson.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, help people realize that life is really working for you, but it's a choice that you have to make, to believe it that way. And perspective is everything.
I love that so much. And what you mentioned about the scientific evidence, and I think it's very important because even me with my acupuncture background, it's all about evidence-based medicine. And it's like, we study energetics, we study the flow of chi, or if you study yoga, you study the flow of prana, or in Siddha medicine and Ayurveda. And how do you put that in a clinical trial when every person is so individual, right?
Yeah.
But there is something about actually being able to record brain waves and brain function. And I'd like you to talk a little bit about your experience with studying neuroplasticity, because I'm going to
Hmm.
introduce that word, because that's actually what we're doing with our mind, right? Creating this malleable thing so we can change. We're not stuck in our ways of operations forever. We
Hmm.
have the ability to change that, but we have to learn it. Some people have it innately, and I think we all have it innately, but it's really like dumbed down through conditioning and just
Right.
living life on this planet, which can be so overwhelming.
Hmm.
But ultimately, when you maybe hear snippets of that type of information, or that type of self-education, you're like, wow, there's this whole other world of science and neuroscience where we can explain this process of manifestation and really like the power of human thought to fulfill our destiny or change ourselves. So I like you to go into that realm and discuss that a little bit.
Sure. So I think it gives us a lot of insight to first even just define the word. That tells us a lot.
Yeah.
So neuroplasticity, neuro comes from obviously neurology and the brain and nerves. So it's not just the brain, but it's all the nerves that are connected up there and then communicate with the rest of your body. That's why it does affect the rest of your health in other areas. Um, so there's a wiring system that has a control tower up here and then just sends signals to other places to do whatever based on what you're thinking. Plasticity. So originally we think of plastic as just, things like, plastic forks and spoons, or, whatever's littering our oceans or things like that. But actually plastic came from the word of this invention of the synthetic material that was able to be formed into different shapes. So yeah, now you have milk gallons, you have forks, you have spoons, you have knives, all things with plastic. And it saved a lot of this world, but the meaning of it, the original meaning, I think, has been lost because now we associate it with this object. So plastic just meant that it was simply, as you said, malleable. You can change its shape, meaning that it has no permanence.
Exactly.
And so in the in plastic surgery, when we talk about that as well, it's the reshaping of
Mm.
the face. And that's where we hear it a lot as well. So in neuroplasticity, bringing those two together, it's how can you reshape the, your brain and the wiring in it. And a lot of people, I get that it's very hard to grasp in the sense that you can't necessarily I can't see it happening, not without special scans or things like that. And also a lot of times, these are just pulses of energy. So it's not like you get a bruise and you can observe it. You're like, oh, the color's changed and things like that. They're not these, it's not visible, it's not tactile, not palpable.
Mm-hmm.
So it's this idea that you can change your wiring, unlearn certain things, just like you learned them, and have different effects on your body, because everything has a consequence after that, right? So neuroplasticity, basically, I think it goes down like this. I think the easiest way you can relate to it is, one example in your life is, a lot of people talk about habits. You have a habit that you do every day, and they say, if you can maintain that action for a certain number of days, it actually becomes a habit. It kind of becomes auto-programmed. And it's a real life example of, well, I didn't know it a few weeks ago, and now I do. Now I'm able to do it. And that could have been drinking water for you. That could have been taking walks, maybe something you did more in the beginning of the pandemic until now. Exactly. Thank you for the demo, Vanna.
Thank you for the reminder.
So there's an idea that your actions, if you can maintain and sustain doing them repeatedly, daily, for a certain number of days, they become a habit. So if you take that habit now and sustain it for a certain number of weeks, it starts becoming a part of your attitude on life,
Mm,
you know? And
mm,
now you take that attitude, or what's become an attitude, and you sustain it for many, many months. All of a sudden now it's become your temperament. So
mm,
it's slowly getting more and more permanent, right? As you condition it more and more, it's getting more integrated into you. And when you take that temperament now and you sustain it for many years, many decades, that turns into your personality. So
mm,
if you see how the habit evolved into an attitude, it grew into a temperament, and that temperament fortified into your personality.
mm,
So when people say you can change your personality, it starts with a habit. And when you have changed your personality, you're no longer the same you that you were before. So yes, that's going to have physical effects. It's impossible for your body to stay the same as it was before, because that body belonged to the person you were before.
oh, wow, that's amazing.
So yeah, so now you're in a different body. So now what happens from the personality? How do you connect the personality part to the actual physical part? You know, how does that change me? Well, if you're not thinking the same way anymore and saying, "Ugh, I hate my body, I'm too this, I'm too skinny, I'm too fat, I'm too short, I'm too tall," whatever,
Yeah.
you shift that dialogue, and you're not saying it anymore because now you change your personality.
Mm,
Well, all those little cells and neurons that were spying on all your thoughts, they're not receiving the same thought anymore, because you're not saying the same thought again. So now they're responding to a different signal. It's like before I was waving a red flag and now I'm waving a blue flag. Obviously, they're going to respond differently because those flags are different colors. So it is just a very obedient, your cells and your bodies are just these very obedient parts that listen to what you say and just carry those orders out. And it branches out and manifests into things like how much stress you feel. It can manifest into certain sicknesses, psychosomatic sicknesses, especially.
mm,
So that's all caused by your brain. And even though there are environmental factors and the food we eat, anything that you absorb, that's through vision, through hearing, through thinking, but also the more physical environment, those impact it as well. But a big part of it is controlled up here. So this is how neuroplasticity works. And this is how and why the expression thoughts become things works.
mm-hmm.
And that's the bridge
That's
I want to
good.
gap.
Oh, that's such a good
Right.
explanation. Like really, and I, from our conversations earlier, like
Mm,
I am so into that field and obviously
yeah.
because of my background
Right.
and everything, but I never really realized to the extent that I did this in my life, even prior to reading materials and educating myself on this topic. When you said habits leading to attitude, leading to temperament change, leading to
Mm,
personality change.
mm,
It's so interesting to me because I was this person when I was younger. I would always admire people who are very calm and tranquil in their way of how they carry themselves. And I was always this energetic kid, and like I have a lot of energy. And I just thought to myself, I just want to change a little bit. I just want to find a little bit more of that calmness. And I think that came into play when I started meditating very regularly. Like I always dabbled in it since I was a kid. My dad would be like, yeah, go, do your headstands so you're not bored and stuff like that. But it's really when I started meditating daily and like shifting these patterns in myself that I was like, oh, wow, yes, I can channel my energy and I can be this energetic person, but I don't have to be like that all the time, right? And so that's why I can teach meditation and qigong and all these tranquil, calm practices, right?
Yeah.
So how you explained that was really, really like, oh, wow, I did that for myself without even knowing.
Yeah, yeah. So,
That's
I mean, you bring up a great point, because two great points, actually. I mean, first of all, you are already doing it, and a lot of times in your life.
yeah.
So this shouldn't feel so intimidating. Now you're aware that you've been doing it all along. Now, how do you become conscious of it and actually use it to your benefit, to level up your game, to improve your life, for you to find a deeper sense of joy or centering, whatever it is you're looking for? So, and meditation you bring up, and that's great, because a lot of people have this impression, at least I didn't even in the beginning, this meditation could be this very like, oh, it's just for breathing and calming down. I don't get what else it is, or it's a little hippie for me. I don't know if I'm that type of personality. I can't meditate. And it's not just locking yourself in silence. Meditation is just simply a tool just to calm down, just like a relaxing bath, anything else. So, and it looks like whatever you want it to make it look like. It's just a vehicle to eliminating the excess noise around you, so that you can kind of hone in with your thoughts and see what those thoughts that we talked about before, that you might have gained from childhood, what those thoughts really are, and saying, is this serving me right now? Do I want to hold on to these thoughts, or is it impeding me?
Yeah.
So I like that you're bringing up meditation, because I think there's a lot of like mystical imagery around that is worth dispelling, because it's nothing more than just listening to yourself and taking a moment and just being that quiet Christina for a moment,
Exactly.
so that all the stuff, and there is a deeper wisdom inside of you, like better. That's called sometimes a gut instinct, but
Mhm.
we can't hear it because there's so much other distraction. It's just a way to eliminate that distraction, slough all that off, so that you can come and hear the important stuff that matters to you, to help guide, where do I want to go here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So tell me a little bit, we talked earlier about certain instances in your life. You suffered a concussion, right? And that kind of led you further on this path, yeah?
Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit about that? Because I'm sure some people can relate, some people may not relate on a physical level, but the rest, I'm definitely sure that they can.
Yeah. So, sure. I thought after the bike accident, that was it for my big accident. After that, that one blow was enough to cover everything for the rest of my life. But as an avid biker, and especially in New York City, and just active in general, the probability that I would get into another incident was high, and it did happen. But um, so one day I had been riding my bicycle, and there was a big pothole. My tire went into it, didn't come out, and I got flung forward. And I simply got hit in the face. That's it. It didn't even hit my head. I had a helmet on, and it didn't even hit my head. So it just got hit in the face. So that was enough. So a concussion is simply when your head is whiplashed, and there's a space between your head, your brain, and the inside surface of your skull. So the brain just plops forward, kind of like you see in those test drive dummy movies where it
Mhm.
whiplashes. So now your brain is just shaken, and it can take a long time to recover, depending on how much rest you get. But it is a very torturous process, I felt. um, I couldn't function really. I would have to get up, simply go wash like one dish, and then I'd get so exhausted I'd pass out for 16 hours. Wake up again, maybe go to the bathroom. Oh, it was so draining just to walk to the bathroom and back. I'd pass out again. And you need that sleep. But at the same time, the brain is so disturbed, it doesn't even sleep well. And I think usually that's why people end up sleeping longer. So now, besides from the physical symptoms though, it took me to this magical place. In the moment, it wasn't so pleasant. But now looking in retrospect, it really taught me to be present. And I will explain how. Um, my brain was so fatigued that I could not bother to think of anything that just happened 5 minutes ago. And I didn't have the brain energy to think of what was about to happen or worry about my future either. I just needed to focus on what I need to get done. Emily, you need to walk from here to the bathroom. Emily, you need to walk from here to the train station to go to your doctor's appointment, whatever it is. I could only focus on every next step I took. That's all I had the brain capacity to anticipate. So I had no room to think of my past and no room to think of my future. So now there's this tiny slit in the middle of those two, a little window that's the present. And it's really hard for us to stay in there. But my brain had no choice but to stay there because it just didn't have the energy to think about all this out here. So it was the first time in my life, I think, that I actually noticed the birds chirping in New York City. I remember that very distinctly, that I was walking to a doctor's appointment and I was just looking at, all right, left foot, then right foot, then left foot, and all of a sudden I was just warped into this silent area where I just heard kind of the birds chirping and started noticing all these things in the present that I would have never paid attention to because I'm like, oh, what time is it? When do I need to get there? When's the train coming? Now out of the concussion, I don't blame us for not doing it that often. It is really hard. I've not been able to replicate that moment. I think it takes a lot of discipline and a lot of meditation. But how close can we get it there? Enough to, even for if that 5 minutes, just get in that present and get in your body.
Yeah.
And that's what the concussion taught me. And again, I was asking myself questions like, another accident? Because I had 2 more slight falls after that also kind of just shook my head a little bit. And I was like, what am I doing wrong? Why do I have such bad luck? What am I doing wrong to receive it? Is this payback for something? I don't get it. So these questions come up every single time. Why me? Why me? And I don't think that there's really an answer for that necessarily. But if you were chosen to go through something like that, and you have to go through it anyway, well, why don't you just choose to go through it in a way that makes it not have been in vain? Meaning, come out of it with something. If you got to do it anyway, come out of it with something that's going to make your life better, make you a little wiser, something. What is the lesson that you learned? And that concussion was the start of not only understanding the present, number one, but number two, a new perspective on my life, where I realized a lot of people, when they say, look at the glass half full, why don't you make a list of all the good things in your life and just focus on that? And that wouldn't make sense to me. And I'd say, well, what about this list of bad things on my life that's still there? Just because I'm shifting focus doesn't make this stuff go away. So for me, it was looking at all bad stuff that was going on in my life. In that time, it was like the concussion, the symptoms, everything, the recovery. Yeah. And after surviving it, realizing how each one of those bad things on that list led to something good. The concussion led to more awareness. That back accident that happened years ago, that led to a greater wisdom and understanding of neuroplasticity. I was a happier person after that, just because I was like, oh, I'm so grateful to be on the other side of this fence. And a lot of people didn't make it.
Absolutely.
So my advice is, if you can take a look at your list of all the bad things that you're not satisfied with, or all the bad things that happened to you, and find out how they led to maybe something good. In other words, see the silver lining in that.
Mm.
All of a sudden, every single bad thing on that checklist, on that list, is actually resulting as something good, right? So everything on that bad list now is something good. So now you have a list of good things that are happening to you and a list of good things that are happening to you at the end. And if it's good and good, well, you can't lose in life, can you?
I
So
love
even
that.
the bad stuff is happening for you, but it is your job to find it. And that's what they mean when they say happiness is a choice. You have to choose to go down that list and see why it might have happened and what it brought into your life. It could be a bad ex that taught you a lesson or reflected something more about you. It could be the loss of a job that saved you because deep down inside you secretly hated it, but you weren't connected enough to know. What is there good about that? And if you can dominate that, you will be indomitable in life. Because now you realize, well, I can't lose. Everything's happening for me. Why do I need to have fear of anything? All right, bring it on. Any hard thing that's coming, I know it's going to have a good end because I have the power to convert it that way and see that. So bring it on. So now you stop getting scared at life and all the failures that might happen, because you know those failures aren't really failures, not if you don't want them to be. So that's kind of what the injuries have taught me, I think. And I was very much like you, where I was bubbly with energy and constantly having to do stuff. I would have never chosen to think about, sit and think and lie there and contemplate these things. Life needed to hit me down so hard where I couldn't move and couldn't function. And all I had time to do was sit and reflect until I dug deep enough to find my gold, which was, aha, now I get it. And then that helped the time pass. And before you know it, with time, things kind of healed. But I was a different person, completely 180 different, bigger and different. And so it's possible for anyone. It really is. People have been through harder things, bigger things. Um, so it's a choice at the end of the day.
That is brilliant, Emily. That is so brilliant. And you know, it's interesting how you say these things because it makes me think about acupuncture and what Chinese medicine believes in, right? And sometimes because it's not mainstream medical science, if you will, it seems so extraordinary to people. How does this even work, right? And one concept in Chinese medicine is that we choose to come into this life. We even choose the family that we're born into because there are certain lessons that we need to gain in this life.
Yeah.
No matter how hard, how we go through pain and suffering, sometimes there are injuries, accidents, in some really nasty cases, rape and wars and babies dying. And like, why do these things happen, right? And so some of the concepts that we teach, and I actually use it with my clients who come to see me for acupuncture and for emotional healing and even physical healing, is to understand that whatever suffering, exactly what you were saying, whatever suffering and pain you're going through is an opportunity for you to bring yourself to a higher state of awareness and understand where, why, right? Not, oh, why me, but like, hey, what is the lesson behind
Mm-hmm.
this? How can I grow out of this experience and become a better human being? Because ultimately, what we believe in Chinese medicine is that you have chosen the accidents, you have chosen these things, whether it's karmic baggage because of your past lives, if people believe that or not, but that we have made these choices already for ourselves, knowing that we have growth to do as a spiritual being, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you know, then science comes into play and you can explain it in all these other ways, but as far as the energetics of it go, it's like, listen, it's not poor you, let's work on this, let's see how you can get better. And knowing that you can get better if you do the work, the
Mm-hmm.
work is inevitable. If you don't do the work and you just sit there, oh my God, poor me, I'll never be able to move again, or poor me, I was raped, or whatever the case may be, right? I mean, I come from Serbia. We've gone through wars. I've lost family members. I never felt like a victim. I never felt like a poor me. I've always tried to bring myself up, and like, I was talking to someone else about it, and I said, it's teenagers. We were in high school and war started, and I was studying for a chemistry exam with a friend of mine, and all you hear is sirens, and it's like NATO's bombing the city. And we didn't go to school for 73 days. Someone would say, oh my God, what's going to happen with us? Blah, blah. No, we were kids. We were like, you know what? We have more time to play. We have more time to spend with families. So it's really how you look at it. It's also
Right.
the perspective of it, right? And
Right.
changing that internal state of mind in order to change the outside state around us. Right. So how you explained it was just really on point.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think you bring up a lot of very salient, important points that I hear really resonating with me what you said about just kind of where do you go from where you are? It's not just about the why me,
Yeah.
but what now type
Mm-hmm.
of thing. So whether some philosophies believe that you created that destiny for yourself, and sometimes it's not one of blame. I do want to get that clear with people. Sometimes it's not like they're saying like you committed some sort of wrongdoing, so now you actually deserve this and you brought this upon yourself. Well, people will be sitting there and say, I didn't want cancer.
Right.
It's not that. It's just what was the likelihood that, for example, Emily was going to get into an accident and have a concussion? Well, I do a lot of biking and it's in a dangerous city like New York, so pretty high. So it's kind of like what were all the ingredients that kind of came together to make that perfect storm happen for you? So I do want to be clear that a lot of times these philosophies aren't necessarily blaming you and saying, this is a punishment, this is payback. It's just it was like more likely that it was going to happen to you, just like the accident was more likely to happen to me than somebody who doesn't bike, right?
Exactly.
But the important part is saying to yourself, not going back into the past and getting stuck there and saying like, what happened? Why did this happen? That's cool too, in order to understand, well, where did I make a mistake so I don't repeat it again? But not stewing in that. And finally, at some point, you've got to come to the present and you got to say, now it's like this. So now what? And you have to get there. And now you have to say, okay, how am I going to move forward this? What can I take what was given to me and what can I do? So you're right. It's absolutely what you take and then make of it. And that changes. And I do want to say also, for those of you who are comparing yourself and saying, well, there are people dying in war and there are people starving in other places, and I'm just complaining about the fact that I can't get a job. I think, though it's true, I'm sure the easier of the problems is quite obvious. But I encourage you guys to also give yourself a little bit of compassion because those problems are still yours. Yes, if it was between running from, escaping from war as a war refuge versus just finding another job, yes, obviously the easier battle is clear. But it's not. You two are different people in different places. So still, I think, acknowledge and honor that this is a challenge for you. And now what can I do it? Because we all deserve to be happy and we all deserve to recognize that, yes, these problems and challenges are still mine, even though compared to other people, it might be more or less significant. So.
Yeah, that's a very valid point. Yeah. Thank you so much
Of course.
for sharing
My
your
pleasure.
knowledge and really
Thank you.
explaining the path.
Now it's just, feel free to contact me if you have any questions about these things. I'm just out there speaking and kind of just doing my thing. If this is something that you guys want a discussion with, use these platforms. Like that's why we're here.
Exactly.
Christina has a channel and use these platforms to really talk about these things and where can you level up. So so any information I have, I will send it up and Christina will include it in the description.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for being
Sure.
here with me, and we'll see you next time.
I'll see you next time.